Good afternoon. We are going to begin with the first session of block second of paper 10, MA final. We have already discussed the beginners of Indian English, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Michael Madhusudan Dutt, Toru Dutt, Kashi Prasad Ghosh, and other important poets and novelists of the beginning. Now let us begin with another important Indian writer in English, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was born in an established family in Kanthalpura on June 26, 1838. Having completed his education from Hooghly College, he entered the arena of writing. During the time of Bengal Renaissance, that the literature emerged from Bengal was somewhat different and unique in itself. Literary history of that time is of utmost importance as Bankim's works have an importance in history as they were the milestones encouraging middle class life, centrality of women's position, her life, and the way he presented moral conflicts in the people's heart. These all things not only gave him popularity, but he who hmm? but he who explored and settled in a new region of writing, but also an unconventional, independent minded political writer. Because of his role as a nationalist, he powerfully emphasized the need to protest against the British rule. Let's have a bird's eye view at Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's contribution to literary map. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee has an endless contribution to the history of literary map. He was one who started Bengali literature. Although he belonged to an orthodox family, he didn't stick his writings to a limit or a region. He was a man of progressive mind. His wide vocabulary made his prose style very interesting. Through his works, he tried to spread out the feeling of nationalism and unity in the hearts of the people. He tried to make them understand the need to throw out rulers out of India. He had a mixed feeling towards both reformist movement of that time and, for example, widow remarriage and abolition of polygamy. He was very much influenced by Johann Stuart Mill, James Stuart Mill, as well as by the utilitarian theory very much prevalent in those days. In his essay, Samay, he covers whole of Indian society and talks about the inequalities developed in the society, extent of oppression of women, caste division, and the ways of exploitation of peasants by the landlords and higher society. It is often said that Bankim Chandra Chatterjee reflected many instances of his life, his personal experiences, especially those of his married life in his novels. Even his very first novel, Raj Mohan's Wife, the critics trace, and especially the Bengali writers trace, much of autobiographical element in this novel. The beautiful and passionate Mantagini, the female protagonist of this novel, is married to a villainous man and in love with her sister's husband, represents the vitality of women who remain strong in the face of brutality and the conflicting expectations of middle class society. Here, Banking Chand Chatterjee has tried to portray the realistic scenario of Bengal, and not only Bengal, it is a sort of microcosm of India. What was the situation of women in those days, even in Hindu society? How were they subjected to the norms of patriarchy, in which male usurped the whole space and woman was thrust on the margins? Man had any right to do, any morality to follow, to have any relation anywhere possible for him, but the same could not be tolerated to any extent in case of women. In this novel also, Bankim Chand's vivid descriptions of the routine of Bengali households provide a revealing portrait of life in the 19th century. Rajmohan's Wife continues to be relevant for its universal themes of love and romance and resonates even today for its portrayal of strong women. The story is quite simple. Matangini, to whom the book's title refers to, overhears a plot by her husband Raj Mohan to steal an important document from Madhav, who is her brother in law. She loves her sister dearly and Madhav in more ways than one. So she immediately sets out in the middle of the night through the forest to her sister's house to warn them, though the plot is foiled, it is not without consequences. Matangini has to face the dire consequences of the male dominated society because the society has its own constructs, its own rules, its own codification, and manners and behaviors are codified for everybody. Individual whosoever, and especially women, have no right to pursue their unfulfilled desire, repressed sexuality, marginalized existence, and sometimes even inhuman conditions of inhabitation. All these can be seen even in the case of the novel Raj Mohan's Wife. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee has shown in the novel that Matangini is contrasted with her friend Kankamai. She is unwilling, or we can say hesitant, even to leave her wheel. In the early days of her life, two aspects of Matangini are shown in this novel. In the first phase, in the early days, she is so shy, so timid, so traditional that she does not even dare to unveil herself. Kanak, her friend, laughed at her and said, "Come now, my proud girl, let's go and show beauty's splendor to the gaping idiots." "Hang you, monkey," cried Matangini and hid her blushing face in her veil. This simple reaction, mixed with mild resentment to her own friend, shows that how tradition bound she is. So innocent she is that when again we see her face in the second phase of her life, it has turned into accidental. Her innocence has been lost due to cruel and brutal behavior of her husband, who never treated her as a wife, as a human being, as a paramour, or as an equal, but as a traditional, proverbial, good Hindu wife. She never makes any complaint or retaliates to whatever happens. Only modesty and long suffering are permanently imprinted on her face. Only tears were streaming down her face. At the sight of her silent suffering, the cruel man softened a little. He no longer tried to beat her, but continued his abuse. Now, see, considering wife as a human being, not beating her, sparing some space of life for her, is also considered benevolence, adjustment, and kind heartedness of the husband. That means wife is always at the mercy of her husband, who in Hindu society is considered Pati Parmeshwar, God, or next to God. The scene at the beginning framed her as submissive and easy to control as a person who gives up everything for the sake of others' happiness. Matangini also never thinks of her personal happiness. She was a devoted wife, she is a devoted daughter in law, and even in her father's house, she has been very obedient daughter, always maintaining the tradition and the reputation of her father's family. Girls are generally considered to be the custodian of the reputation of a Hindu family. If a boy does something, people don't mind it much. But even a slightest lapse on the part of a girl is considered disreputation in the society, and the family takes it completely against their prestige. Right from the beginning, they are made aware that you are girls, you are daughters, you are expected to behave only like this. Kamala Das also has mentioned in one of her poems, the introduction, that the family members told her not to sit on the walls, not to wear shirt, not to behave like boys, not to write in English. She should adopt all the ways and manners of a traditional Hindu wife. That's why she was expected to be only an embroiderer or a slave driver or an expert in the cooking art and all these things, the traditional manners of the mode of life in Hindu houses. For Matangini, things go on for some time, but then there are changes. In the chapter title, Love Conquer Fear, or Love Can Conquer Fear, Matangini leaves her home at the night to save the destiny of her sister and brother in law and puts herself at risk. Then, summoning all her resolutions, she made rapid but noiseless steps. Her heart beat as she walked through the jungly path. The dreary silence and the dark shadows appalled her. But the feeling of love, when it comes to surface, overcomes all fears. And the individual is ready to face any challenge or consequence. There is a limit to everything and even to suffering, even to tolerance and the internalization of the pattern of life. On getting chance in loneliness, she expressed her love towards Madhav to him. She said, "Ah, have me not, despise me not," cried she with an intensity of feeling which shook her delicate frame. See, this was the moment when a woman in her was aroused for the fulfillment of her life. In her husband's home, all have her womanly urges were dried, were neglected, given no importance, and there was no compatibility between her and her husband. And a vast vacuum was created in her heart, which she wanted to fulfill now with Madhav. She further said, "Spurn me not for this last weakness. This, Madhav, this may be our last meeting. It must be so. And too deeply have I loved you. Too deeply do I love you. And still to part with you, for even without a struggle." The way she expressed her love is entirely different from her nature shown at the beginning of the novel. In the beginning, she is so tradition bound that she doesn't dare even to lift her veil. And now, the depravities of life and the inhuman treatment at the hand of her husband, the cruelty meted out to her, have completely changed her, transformed her, and a new woman is born in her. Or we can say psychologically that there is a split, the divided self, and the another self surfaces now. The author showed the two different faces of the same coin. What is the reason behind this change? And the change is natural, although surprising. Everyone has a limit to everything, whether it is hatred or suffering, patience or tolerance, cruelty, adaptation or adjustment. To what extent can one tolerate? Matangini at last broke all her walls and ran away from her home at night with immense fortitude. From where she mustered this courage and why she kept waiting and waiting and suffering for such a long time is also questionable. The transformation is violation of psychological probability. This appears to be an intentional choice. The author could have shown her as a detacher in the beginning, or he could have her die with suffering, sinful passion that remains hidden. But he didn't go for it. He chose this, which is very relevant as well as the explanatory one. So Matangani's character is shown in a very natural way. Her suffering and forbearance also as a characteristic Hindu wife. Her revolt as a lady whose tolerance is over and has broken all the walls of pain and fear. The word transgression in Matangani's case seems to threaten not only the integrity of a Hindu wife but also the family stronghold. However, a transgression of that much suffering is quite natural. This is what Banking Chand Chatterjee seems to create in a character who is not justified in her sufferings. Thus, the author has tried to enlist reader's sympathy for Matangini. The character of Rajmohan as a villain, cruel, brutal, surly, and a man full of evils adds to this transgression. Hence, when Matangini finally says something, suddenly leaving and breaking all her marital and familial boundaries, she is forgiven immediately. She says, yes, reproach me, Madhav, censor me, teach me, for I have been sinful. Sinful in the eyes of my God, and I must say it, Madhav, of my God on earth, of yourself. But you cannot hate me more than I hate myself. See the pathetic condition of that woman. Although in a tradition bound society, an extramarital affair is unacceptable, but the way she expresses her love for Madhav undermines the opposite behavior of her earlier rejection. Matangani's love for Madhav is a result of her unhappy married life, but Madhav's love for her is not the case of unhappy or incompatible married life. Rather, he is very happy with his married life. His wife, Kamangini, is gentle, caring, kind, and has full faith in her husband. He also loves his wife and is satisfied with his married life. In Madhav Matangani relationship, Madhav seems to be feeling guilty and therefore tries to show the right path to her by saying, "Listen to me, Matangini, listen and spare both of us this sore affliction. At your father's house, the flame was kindled, which seems fated to consume us both, and which we were too young to quench by desperate efforts. But if even we never flinch from the path of duty, shall we not now that years of affliction have schooled our hearts, eradicated from the evil which corrodes and blisters them? O Matangini, let us forget each other. Let's separate. Novel shows that virtue is not a matter of intrinsic worth. It is defined by the choices made by the people. A responsible attitude towards marriage can make it happy, as in the case of Madhav. It can be seen that transgression is an essential part in almost all the novels of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. In the second session, we shall elaborately discuss this. Thanks.